My name, at least the one they gave me when they dropped me here, is Anya Petrova. I am a Chiss, an alien, though I'm certain no one around me suspects a thing. The Chiss are known across the galaxy for their strategic minds, their cool demeanor, and their signature blue skin, none of which I currently possess. A top-notch disguise, courtesy of the Ascendancy, is the key to my mission, infiltrating the highest levels of human society to gather intelligence on their nascent space program. Before my transformation, I was Zelia of the expansionary fleet. I excelled in every aspect of my training, both physical and mental. The intricate dance of espionage thrilled me, the challenge of navigating a labyrinth of information to extract that one vital detail was a puzzle I reveled in solving. Yet, I wasn't prepared for the complexity of human emotions, the depth of their connections. My target, Dr. Thomas Ashton, was a brilliant astrophysicist, the linchpin in humanity's leap towards the stars. I'd studied his every move, his every word, creating a psychological profile so detailed I could predict his reactions to an unsettling degree. Getting close to him was easy enough. I secured a position as a research assistant at the institute where he worked, my false credentials impeccable, my performance flawless. I began to learn more about Dr. Ashton than any intelligence report could offer. He was more than a brilliant mind, he was kind, compassionate, with a dry wit that snuck up on you. He was passionate about his work, his eyes lighting up when he talked about the vastness of space, the endless possibilities it held. His excitement was infectious, and I found myself sharing in it, genuinely interested in his work. Spending time with him, observing his interactions with his colleagues, his friends, his family, I realized that humans were not the simplistic creatures I'd been led to believe. Their emotions were messy, contradictory, yet there was a raw beauty to their vulnerability, their capacity for love and joy. I felt a strange pull towards Dr. Ashton, a warmth in my chest whenever he smiled at me, a flutter in my stomach when our hands brushed against each other. I dismissed it at first as an anomaly, a side effect of the disguise perhaps, or the stress of the mission. But the feeling persisted, growing stronger with each passing day. The more I learned about him, the more I questioned the Ascendancy's motives. Was humanity truly a threat, or were we simply afraid of their potential? Could we not coexist peacefully, share our knowledge, explore the universe together? One evening, as we worked late on a complex equation, Dr. Ashton looked up at me, his eyes filled with a warmth I'd never seen before. "Anya," he said, my human name sounding foreign on his lips, "you're an incredible asset to this team. I'm grateful for your help." I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thank you, Dr. Ashton," I managed to say, my voice barely above a whisper. He chuckled. "Tom," he corrected. "Please, call me Tom." A small smile tugged at my lips. "Tom," I repeated, the sound of his name feeling strangely right. That night, as I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, I realized the truth I'd been avoiding. I was falling in love with Tom Ashton. The following day, a sense of unease gnawed at me. It wasn't the mission, it was the realization of what I was risking. I was trained to be invisible, a ghost in the machine, not to form attachments. Yet, here I was, deeply, irrevocably connected to a human. The thought of leaving him, of betraying his trust, felt like a physical ache. When I saw Tom that morning, his smile sent a familiar warmth through me. He was wearing a worn-out NASA t-shirt, a stark contrast to his usual crisp attire. It made him look more approachable, more human. The conflict within me intensified. I wanted to be close to him, to learn everything about him, yet I knew it was a dangerous path. Later that day, Tom called me into his office. He had a thoughtful expression on his face, his brows furrowed in concentration. "Anya, I've been meaning to ask you something," he began, his voice hesitant. "I know we haven't known each other for very long, but I feel a connection with you, a deep one. I was wondering if you'd like to have dinner with me, outside the institute, I mean." My heart leapt at his words. A part of me wanted to shout yes and throw caution to the wind. But the rational part, the spy, held me back. "I'd love to, Tom," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm not sure it's a good idea." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. "Why not?" I hesitated, searching for the right words. "It's complicated," I finally said. He nodded, understanding dawning in his eyes. "I get it," he said softly. "Work can be demanding. But I hope you'll change your mind." I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. I got up to leave, but before I reached the door, he called out my name. I turned to look at him. "Anya," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that melted my resolve. "I know you're hiding something. I don't know what it is, and I don't want to pry. But I want you to know that you can trust me. I stared at him, a million thoughts racing through my mind. Could I really trust him? Could I risk everything for a chance at love? That evening, I found myself at Tom's doorstep, dressed in a simple yet elegant outfit I'd purchased for the occasion. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A few moments later, Tom opened the door, a surprised smile spreading across his face. "Anya," he said, his voice filled with delight. "I'm glad you changed your mind." He led me inside, his home warm and inviting. The walls were lined with bookshelves filled with titles ranging from astrophysics to science fiction novels. He'd prepared a simple dinner, pasta with a homemade marinara sauce, the aroma filling the air with a comforting warmth. We talked about everything and nothing, our conversation flowing effortlessly. I learned about his childhood, his dreams, his fears. He told me about his late wife, Sarah, and how much he missed her. His honesty and vulnerability disarmed me, making me want to open up to him in return. As the evening progressed, I found myself telling him about my childhood on Chilla, about my family, my friends. I even told him about my love for the Chiss ascendancy, carefully omitting any mention of my mission. Looking into his eyes, I felt a connection I'd never experienced before. It was as if our souls were intertwined, our hearts beating in unison. I knew I was treading on dangerous ground, but I couldn't stop myself. Later that night, as we stood on his balcony, gazing up at the stars, Tom turned to me. "Anya," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Can I kiss you?" I looked at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I shouldn't, that it would be a betrayal of my mission, of my people. But I couldn't resist. I closed my eyes and leaned in, my lips meeting his in a kiss that was both tender and passionate. In that moment, I knew I was lost. I had fallen in love with a human, a man who was everything I wasn't supposed to want. And as I stood there, in his arms, under the light of a million stars, I knew that my mission was no longer my priority. My heart belonged to Tom Ashton. In the aftermath of that stolen kiss, a new reality settled over me. The once clear lines of my mission blurred, replaced by the intoxicating colors of love. I found myself torn between the duty I'd been trained for and the yearning of my heart. Tom, unaware of my internal turmoil, seemed happier than I'd ever seen him. The man who once carried the weight of the world on his shoulders now walked with a lightness in his step, a twinkle in his eye. The days that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. We spent every moment we could steal together, exploring hidden corners of the city, sharing meals at quaint cafes, losing ourselves in deep conversations. But the looming specter of my mission never truly faded. I knew the ascendancy would soon be expecting a report, and I had nothing to show for my time here but a blossoming romance. One evening, as Tom and I sat on his couch, watching an old sci-fi movie, he reached for my hand. "Anya," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I love you." My heart skipped a beat. The words I'd longed to hear now filled me with dread. How could I respond? I couldn't lie to him, not anymore. But the truth was far too complex, too dangerous. "Tom," I began, my voice trembling. "There's something I need to tell you." He looked at me, his eyes filled with concern. "What is it?" I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the inevitable fallout. "I'm not who you think I am," I said. "I'm not even from Earth." Tom's eyes widened in surprise. "What do you mean?" I told him everything. About my true identity as Zilia, a Chiss spy. About my mission to infiltrate human society and gather intelligence on their space program. About how I'd fallen in love with him and how that love had compromised my mission. Tom listened in stunned silence, his face pale. When I finished, he sat back, his eyes closed, as if trying to process the enormity of what he'd just heard. After what felt like an eternity, he opened his eyes and looked at me. "So, everything, all this time, it was all a lie?" I flinched at the hurt in his voice. "No, Tom," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Not everything. My feelings for you, they're real. I love you, Tom. More than you could ever imagine." He stared at me for a long moment, then slowly shook his head. "I don't understand. Why? Why did you lie to me?" I reached out to touch him, but he pulled away. "I had to," I said, my voice choked with emotion. "It was my mission. But I never meant to hurt you. I never meant to fall in love with you." Tom stood up, his face a mask of pain and betrayal. "I need some time to think," he said, his voice cold and distant. He walked out of the room, leaving me alone with the shattered remains of my heart. As I sat there, numb with despair, a sudden realization hit me. My mission wasn't the only thing that had been compromised. The Ascendancy's carefully laid plans had also been jeopardized. Tom was a brilliant scientist, a key player in humanity's space program. With my true identity exposed, he could easily expose the Ascendancy's operations, potentially sparking an interstellar conflict. I had not only betrayed my heart, but also my people. And in that moment, I knew that my actions would have far-reaching consequences, not just for myself and Tom, but for the entire galaxy. The plot twist is that Anya's mission wasn't just about gathering intelligence. The Ascendancy had a more sinister plan in mind, one that could potentially harm humanity. By falling in love with Tom, Anya has not only compromised her mission but also put the fate of both her people and humanity in jeopardy. The story will now explore the consequences of Anya's actions and the difficult choices she must make as she tries to protect the man she loves while also fulfilling her duty to her people. I spent a sleepless night wrestling with my conscience. The weight of my betrayal pressed heavily on my heart, yet a flicker of hope remained. Perhaps I could still salvage the situation, find a way to protect both Tom and the Ascendancy. But as dawn approached, the harsh reality of my circumstances sunk in. I had no plan, no solution, only a growing sense of dread. In the morning, I found Tom in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked exhausted, his eyes red-rimmed. I wanted to reach out to him, to apologize, to explain, but I knew there were no words that could undo the damage I'd done. "Tom," I began, my voice barely a whisper. He raised a hand, silencing me. "Don't," he said, his voice flat. "Just don't." I watched helplessly as he finished his coffee and headed out the door without another word. I knew he needed space, time to process the betrayal. But I couldn't bear the thought of losing him. Desperate, I decided to take a risk. I contacted my superiors in the Ascendancy, explaining the situation. I begged them to understand, to give me a chance to fix things. To my surprise, they agreed. But their solution was not what I'd hoped for. They ordered me to complete my mission. To use my relationship with Tom to extract the information they needed. To betray him again. I was horrified. I couldn't do it. Not again. But I knew that if I disobeyed, the consequences would be dire. Not just for me, but for Tom as well. Torn between my love for Tom and my loyalty to the Ascendancy, I made a decision. I would protect Tom, no matter the cost. I would expose the Ascendancy's true intentions to him, warn him of the danger they posed. I met Tom at a park near his house, a place where we'd often gone for walks. He looked surprised to see me, but also wary. "Tom," I said, my voice shaking. "I know you're angry with me, and you have every right to be. But please, listen to me." I told him everything. About the Ascendancy's true intentions, their plans to exploit humanity's resources. About the danger he was in, the threat they posed to his life. As I spoke, I saw the disbelief in his eyes turn to horror, then to anger. When I finished, he stared at me for a long moment, his face pale. "So, you're telling me that your people, the people you claim to love, are planning to invade Earth?" I nodded, unable to meet his gaze. "And you expect me to believe you? After everything you've done?" I reached out to touch him, but he pulled away. "I know I don't deserve your trust," I said, my voice breaking. "But I'm begging you, please believe me. I'm telling you the truth." Tom looked at me, his eyes searching mine. For a moment, I thought I saw a flicker of hope in them. But then it was gone, replaced by a cold determination. "I don't know what to believe anymore," he said, his voice filled with pain. "But I know this, I can't trust you. Not anymore." He turned and walked away, leaving me standing alone in the park, the weight of my betrayal crushing me. I had lost him, and I had lost my way. Days turned into nights, filled with annoying emptiness. My apartment, once a safe haven, now felt like a prison. The silence was deafening, punctuated only by the rhythmic ticking of the clock, a constant reminder of the time I'd wasted, the trust I'd broken. I tried to focus on my work, burying myself in equations and data, but Tom's face haunted me at every turn. I saw him in the hallways, in the lab, even in the reflection of my computer screen. His absence was a gaping wound, a constant ache that refused to heal. One evening, as I sat staring blankly at a half-finished report, a news alert flashed across my screen. "Dr. Thomas Ashton missing," the headline blared. My heart stopped. I frantically clicked on the article, my hands trembling. The report stated that Tom had disappeared from his home 2 days ago, leaving no trace. The police were investigating, but so far, there were no leads. A cold dread washed over me. Had the ascendancy taken him? Were they punishing me for my betrayal? Or was this something else entirely? I knew I had to do something, but I was paralyzed by fear and indecision. I couldn't go to the police, they would never believe my story. And I couldn't contact the ascendancy, they would only see this as an opportunity to further their agenda. I paced my apartment, my mind racing. I had to find Tom, but I didn't know where to start. Then, a memory surfaced, a conversation we'd had about a secret project he was working on. He'd mentioned a remote research facility in the desert, a place where he often went to escape the pressures of his work. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead I had. I packed a bag, grabbed my keys, and headed out the door. The drive to the desert was long and arduous. As I drove, I replayed my conversation with Tom in the park, the hurt in his eyes, the finality in his voice. I had pushed him away, driven him into the arms of danger. When I finally reached the facility, it was well past midnight. The building was dark, save for a single light in the upper floor. I parked my car and approached the entrance, my heart pounding in my chest. I tried the door, but it was locked. I peered through the window, but I couldn't see anything in the darkness. Desperate, I circled the building, searching for another way in. As I rounded the corner, I saw a figure standing in the shadows. I froze, my heart leaping into my throat. The figure stepped into the moonlight, revealing the familiar face of Tom Ashton. I gasped in surprise and relief. "Tom," I cried out, running towards him. He turned to face me, his eyes wide with shock. "Anya? What are you doing here?" I stopped short, my heart aching at the sight of him. He looked thinner, his face etched with worry. "I came to find you," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "I saw the news, and I was so worried." He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes filled with a mixture of emotions I couldn't decipher. Then, without a word, he turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness. I stood there, frozen in place, the cold desert wind whipping around me. I had come all this way, risked everything, only to be rejected once again. But as I turned to leave, I heard a noise behind me. I spun around, my heart pounding. Tom was standing there, his face illuminated by the moonlight. "You shouldn't be here," he said, his voice low and urgent. "It's not safe." "I know," I said, my voice trembling. "But I couldn't let you face this alone." He looked at me, his eyes searching mine. Then, a flicker of hope appeared in their depths. "Come with me," he said, reaching out his hand. I took it, my heart filled with a renewed sense of purpose. Together, we stepped into the darkness, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The weight of Tom's words hung in the air between us, heavier than the desert night. His rejection stung, a fresh wound on top of the already raw ache of my guilt. But beneath the pain, a spark of determination ignited within me. I couldn't let Tom face this threat alone. I wouldn't. "Tom, please," I pleaded, my voice thick with desperation. "You have to believe me. I know I've lied to you, but I swear, I'm telling the truth now. The ascendancy is a threat to humanity, to you. And I won't let them hurt you." He remained silent, his gaze fixed on the ground. I could see the conflict raging within him, the battle between trust and betrayal. "How can I believe you?" he finally asked, his voice hoarse. "After everything you've done?" I took a step closer, my heart pounding in my chest. "Because I love you, Tom," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I love you more than my mission, more than my own people. And I would never do anything to hurt you." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The only sound was the gentle rustling of the wind through the desert brush. Then, a flicker of understanding appeared in his eyes. A tiny spark of hope. "Show me," he said, his voice barely audible. I nodded, a surge of adrenaline coursing through me. This was my chance, my opportunity to redeem myself. I led him inside the research facility, explaining the details of my mission, the ascendancy's plans, their technology. I showed him the evidence I had gathered, the data I had stolen. I laid bare my soul, my fears, my hopes, my love for him. As I spoke, I watched his expression change. The skepticism gave way to concern, then to a growing sense of alarm. When I finished, he sat down heavily, his head in his hands. "I can't believe it," he muttered. "It's like something out of a science fiction novel." I knelt beside him, taking his hand in mine. "It's real, Tom," I said. "And we need to stop them." He looked at me, his eyes filled with a newfound resolve. "We will," he said. "Together." In that moment, I knew that I had not only regained his trust, but also forged an alliance. We were no longer just two individuals caught in a web of deceit and betrayal. We were partners, united in a common cause. Together, we would expose the Ascendancy's plot, protect humanity, and fight for the future we both believed in. And as we stood there, hand in hand, facing the unknown, I knew that our love would be our greatest weapon. We moved quickly, our shared urgency a tangible force in the stale air of the facility. Tom, a brilliant scientist, absorbed the information I presented with remarkable speed, his mind already racing ahead, piecing together the puzzle. I watched a familiar fire ignite in his eyes, the same passion that had once been directed towards the stars now focused on a new, more immediate threat. "We need to warn someone," Tom said, his voice taut with determination. "The government, the military, someone who can stop them." I shook my head. "They won't believe us," I said. "They'll think we're crazy. We need proof, something concrete." Tom's eyes scanned the room, landing on a console covered in blinking lights and complex diagrams. "What about this?" he asked. "Is this part of their technology?" I nodded. "It's a prototype for a long-range communication device," I explained. "They're using it to coordinate their operations." A plan began to form in Tom's mind. "We can use it to send a message," he said, a glimmer of excitement in his eyes. "A warning. To the Ascendancy, to the whole galaxy. We can expose their plans, show them that we won't be pawns in their game." I was hesitant. "It's risky," I said. "If they intercept the message, they'll know we're onto them. They'll come after us." Tom looked at me, his eyes filled with a steely resolve. "We have to take that risk," he said. "For the sake of our planet, for the sake of humanity." We worked tirelessly, fueled by adrenaline and a shared sense of purpose. Tom, with his scientific expertise, manipulated the device, bypassing its security protocols and reprogramming it to transmit our message. I, with my knowledge of the Ascendancy's codes and frequencies, crafted a message that would be impossible for them to ignore. As the final moments ticked away, a wave of doubt washed over me. Had we done enough? Would our message reach the right people? Would it be enough to stop the Ascendancy? Tom must have sensed my hesitation. He reached out, taking my hand in his. "We've done everything we can," he said, his voice reassuring. "Now we have to trust that it's enough." I nodded, drawing strength from his unwavering belief. Together, we pressed the button, sending our message hurtling through the vast expanse of space. As the signal traveled towards its destination, we waited, our hearts pounding in unison. The silence was deafening, the tension palpable. Suddenly, the lights in the facility flickered, then died. We were plunged into darkness, the only sound the hum of the backup generator kicking in. Tom and I exchanged a worried glance. Had the Ascendancy intercepted our message? Were they coming for us? Before we could react, a blinding light filled the room. We shielded our eyes, our bodies instinctively bracing for impact. When the light faded, we saw a figure standing in the doorway, silhouetted against the night sky. It was tall, imposing, with a menacing aura that sent shivers down my spine. As it stepped into the room, its features became visible. It wasn't human, nor was it Chiss. It was something else entirely, something I had never seen before. Its eyes glowed with an eerie light, and its voice echoed through the room, sending chills down my spine. "You have interfered with our plans," it said, its voice filled with malice. "You will pay the price." And as the creature advanced towards us, its claws extended, its fangs bared, I knew that our fight had only just begun.